The fluorescent lights of Lincoln High's cafeteria hummed their usual monotonous tune, casting harsh shadows across rows of lunch tables where 300 students gathered each day at noon. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of autumn day where golden leaves pressed themselves against the windows like they were trying to escape the cold. Inside, the cafeteria buzzed with the familiar symphony of teenage life, trays clattering, chairs scraping, laughter erupting in unexpected bursts, and conversations overlapping into an incomprehensible roar that somehow made perfect sense to those who belonged. Chen sat alone at the corner table near the emergency exit, exactly where she'd positioned herself every single day for the past 3 years. Her table wasn't chosen by accident, it was strategic, calculated, safe. From here, she could see almost everyone without being seen, could observe without being observed, could exist in that peculiar space between invisibility and presence that had become her specialty. Her lunch sat untouched before her, a sandwich her mother had carefully prepared that morning, cut into perfect triangles the way Maya had liked them when she was 7, a small container of cut fruit, and a thermos of tea that had long since gone cold. She wasn't eating. She never really ate during lunch. Instead, she was doing what she always did, watching, listening, and drawing. Her sketchbook lay open on the table, and her pencil moved across the page with a confidence that never appeared in her physical movements. On the paper, the cafeteria came alive in a way it never could in reality. She captured the basketball player 2 tables over, mid-laugh, his head thrown back in genuine joy. She sketched the couple by the windows, their hands intertwined on the table between them, lost in a world that contained only 2 people. She drew the lunch lady who'd worked there for 27 years, whose name tag read Dorothy but whom everyone called Mrs. D, her face creased with smile lines that spoke of decades of feeding hungry teenagers. Maya's gift was observation. While other students were busy performing the elaborate social dance of high school, who sat with whom, who was dating whom, whose party was the event of the weekend, Maya was documenting it all. Her sketchbooks, 17 of them now, stacked in her bedroom closet, contained a complete anthropological study of Lincoln High. Every emotion, every interaction, every moment of joy or heartbreak or boredom, she captured it all. Not because anyone asked her to. Not because anyone even knew she was doing it. But because it was the only way she knew how to connect with a world she'd never quite figured out how to be part of. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At the center table, the epicenter of Lincoln High's social hierarchy, sat Brandon Whitmore and his constant companions, Tyler Jackson and Marcus Reed. Brandon was the kind of handsome that seemed almost manufactured, perfectly tousled blonde hair that looked effortless but required 20 minutes of careful styling each morning, a jawline that could have been chiseled from marble, and the easy confidence that came from never having been told no to anything in his entire 17 years of life. His father owned half the commercial real estate in town, and Brandon wore that privilege like a second skin, comfortable and unquestioned. Tyler was his lieutenant, tall and broad-shouldered from 4 years of varsity football, with a smile that could charm teachers into extending deadlines and parents into raising curfews. He wasn't cruel by nature, not really, but he'd learned early that laughing at Brandon's jokes and following Brandon's lead was the price of admission to a world where everything came easy. Marcus completed the trio, quick-witted and sharp-tongued, the kind of funny that sometimes crossed the line into mean without him quite noticing or caring. For 3 years, this arrangement had worked. Maya stayed in her corner, invisible and undisturbed. The boys held court at their center table, never acknowledging her existence enough to make it a problem. They existed in parallel universes that occasionally shared the same physical space but never truly intersected. Until today. "Dude, is she seriously drawing again?" Tyler's voice carried across the cafeteria, not quite shouting but loud enough that nearby tables began to quiet, sensing the shift in atmosphere that always preceded drama. He was pointing at Maya, his finger extended like an accusation. Marcus leaned back in his chair, squinting theatrically toward Maya's corner. "Every single day, man. Same table, same weird notebook, same creepy staring at people. It's honestly unsettling." Brandon had been scrolling through his phone, only half listening, but something about the moment caught his attention. Maybe it was boredom. Lunch period was 45 minutes long, and he'd exhausted his usual entertainment options. Maybe it was the audience. The cafeteria had grown noticeably quieter, and there's nothing quite like an audience to bring out the worst in people. Or maybe it was something else entirely, some small cruelty that lives in the hearts of people who've never had to fight for anything, who've never known what it's like to be on the receiving end of attention that cuts rather than celebrates. "Let's find out what's so interesting," Brandon said, standing up with the kind of casual authority that made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Tyler and Marcus exchanged glances, the kind of glance that contained a whole conversation about whether this was a good idea, but they followed anyway, because that's what they always did. Maya saw them coming. Of course she saw them coming. When you spend 3 years studying people, you develop a sixth sense for when the energy in a room changes, when trajectories shift, when you're about to go from observer to observed. Her hand stilled on the page. Her heart began to hammer against her ribcage like it was trying to escape. Every instinct screamed at her to close the sketchbook, to gather her things, to run. But her body had frozen, locked in that terrible paralysis that comes from being seen when you've spent so long trying to be invisible. They approached her table like conquistadors approaching new territory, confident, entitled, oblivious to the destruction they might cause. The cafeteria had gone almost completely silent now. 300 students were watching, some with phones already out and recording, others leaning forward in anticipation, a few looking uncomfortable but not uncomfortable enough to intervene. This was the terrible arithmetic of high school. The entertainment value of someone else's humiliation almost always outweighed the moral imperative to stop it. "Watch a drawing there, quiet girl?" Brandon asked, his voice dripping with false friendliness as he reached for Maya's sketchbook. Maya's hand shot out to protect it, but she wasn't fast enough. Brandon had the reflexes of someone who'd never had to protect anything in his life, who'd always been the one taking rather than defending. He snatched the sketchbook from the table and held it up, out of Maya's reach. "Please," Maya whispered. It was perhaps the first word many of her classmates had ever heard her speak. Her voice was smaller than she'd wanted it to be, thinner, barely audible over the held breath of 300 witnesses. "Please give it back." Brandon flipped through the pages with careless fingers, his eyes widening slightly as he took in the sheer volume of work, the detail, the obvious talent that lived in those pages. For just a moment, so brief it might have been imagined, something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. Or the faint, uncomfortable awareness that the person he was humiliating might actually be more talented than he'd ever be at anything. But that moment passed. It always does. Because acknowledging someone else's worth requires a kind of courage that's much harder to muster than cruelty. "Oh wow," Brandon said, his voice loud enough for the entire cafeteria to hear. "Look at this, guys. Quiet girl has been drawing everyone. This is..." He paused, flipping through more pages. "This is actually kind of creepy. Were you planning to make a shrine or something? Is this how you spend your time? Watching us like some kind of stalker?" "I'm not," Maya started, but her voice cracked. She stood up from her table, trying to reach for the sketchbook, but Brandon simply held it higher, playing a game that had been old when their grandparents were young, keep away, but with someone's dignity instead of a ball. Tyler laughed, but it sounded forced, uncertain. He'd caught a glimpse of one of the drawings, a sketch of himself from last week, sitting on the bleachers after practice, looking exhausted and somehow vulnerable in a way he didn't like seeing reflected back at him. "Come on, Brandon, maybe we should." "Should what?" Marcus interrupted, snatching the sketchbook from Brandon's hands. "Should let her keep her creepy art project? Dude, there's like 100 drawings of people here. That's not normal. That's weird stalker behavior." He held up a page showing a group of girls from the drama club, their heads bent together in laughter. "Did you ask permission to draw these people? Did anyone say you could sit there and stare at them and put them in your little book? The thing about cruelty is that it often disguises itself as righteousness." Marcus genuinely believed he was making a point, that he was protecting people from Maya's unwanted attention, that her quiet observation was somehow more invasive than his loud mockery. He didn't see, or didn't want to see, that her sketches were love letters to moments that would otherwise be forgotten, that her art was the opposite of stalking. It was witnessing. It was caring enough to preserve fleeting beauty in a world that moved too fast to notice it. Maya felt tears building behind her eyes, hot and unwelcome. She would not cry. She had promised herself years ago that she would never give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her cry. But her vision was blurring anyway, her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble under the weight of being perceived in exactly the way she'd always feared, as weird, as other, as wrong. It's just art," she managed to say, her voice still barely above a whisper but growing stronger with each word, powered by 3 years of silence and frustration and the peculiar courage that comes from having nothing left to lose. "I draw what I see. I draw people being human. Being real. I didn't think. You didn't think we'd notice?" Brandon cut her off, his voice sharp now, edges showing through the casual cruelty. "You didn't think it was weird to sit there every single day, alone, watching everyone like we're animals in a zoo? What's wrong with you? Why don't you have any friends? Why don't you ever talk to anyone?" The questions hit like physical blows. What's wrong with you? The question Maya had asked herself 1,000 times, late at night when the house was quiet and her mind was loud. What was wrong with her? Why had making friends always felt like trying to speak a language everyone else was born knowing? Why did social interaction feel like a complex equation she could never quite solve? Why was she always on the outside, looking in, drawing what she could never quite be part of? "Maybe there's a reason no one wants to sit with you," Marcus added, and there was something almost pitying in his voice, which was somehow worse than the mockery. "Maybe if you spent less time being a creep with your drawings and more time trying to be normal. Give it back." Maya's voice cut through the cafeteria, and this time it wasn't a whisper. It wasn't loud, Maya didn't do loud, but it was clear, firm, carrying a note of something that made several students sit up straighter. "Give me back my sketchbook. Now." Brandon laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Or what? What are you going to do, quiet girl? Finally talk to someone? Finally join the real world?" He held the sketchbook out to his side, dangling it between thumb and forefinger like it was something distasteful. "You want it? Come get it." Maya stepped forward, her hand reaching out, and Brandon pulled it back at the last second. The same game, the same cruelty. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, his conscience starting to prick at him in ways he'd been successfully ignoring for the past 5 minutes. Marcus was watching the crowd, feeding off their reactions, their phone cameras, their rapt attention. And then Maya did something no one expected. She stopped reaching for the sketchbook. She stopped trying to play their game. Instead, she straightened up, squared her shoulders, and looked Brandon directly in the eyes. It was the first time in 3 years that she'd made direct, sustained eye contact with him, and what he saw there made him take an involuntary step backward. "You want to know what's in there?" Maya asked, her voice steady now, powered by something deeper than courage, by the simple, pure exhaustion of being afraid. "You want to know what I see when I draw you?" The cafeteria had gone beyond silent. It had achieved that peculiar quality of held breath, of 300 people simultaneously leaning forward, waiting for whatever was about to happen. Even the lunch ladies had stopped serving, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "I see Brandon Whitmore," Maya continued, and there was something almost gentle in her voice, which made it cut deeper than any insult could have. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect life handed to him on a silver platter. "I see someone who's never had to work for anything, who's never had to fight for anything, who wouldn't know real struggle if it introduced itself," and shook his hand. Brandon's jaw clenched. "You don't know anything about me." "I know more than you think," Maya said. "I know you're scared. I know that behind all that confidence and cruelty, you're terrified that you're not actually special, that without your father's money and your good looks, you'd be just as invisible as me." "I know more than you think," Maya said. "I know you're scared. I know that behind all that confidence and cruelty, you're terrified that you're not actually special, that without your father's money and your good looks, you'd be just as invisible as me. I know that you tear others down because it's easier than building yourself up. I know that 50 years from now, when you're old and you look back on your life, moments like this, moments where you chose cruelty over kindness, these are the moments you'll regret. The words hung in the air like smoke, visible and tangible and impossible to take back. Brandon's face had gone through several colors, red with anger, white with shock, and finally settling on something that might have been shame, if he'd known how to recognize it. And Tyler, Maya turned to him, her voice never rising, never falling, just steady and inexorable as a tide. I see someone who knows better. I see someone who was raised right, who has a good heart buried under all that need to belong. I've drawn you 17 times, did you know that? 17 times over 3 years, and in almost every drawing, you're looking away from whatever cruelty is happening near you. You're looking away because you know it's wrong, but you don't have the courage to stop it. Tyler's face crumbled. He looked at his shoes, at the floor, anywhere but at Maya or the 300 pairs of eyes watching him. And Marcus, Maya's gaze shifted to the third member of the trio. I see someone who uses humor as a weapon because he learned early that making people laugh was safer than making them think. I see someone who's so busy performing that he's forgotten who he actually is underneath all the jokes and the posturing. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it. For perhaps the first time in his high school career, he had nothing to say. Maya held out her hand. My sketchbook. Please. Brandon looked at the book in his hands. He looked at Maya. He looked at the 300 students watching, waiting, recording. And slowly, as if the sketchbook weighed 1,000 pounds, he handed it back to her. Maya took it, clutched it to her chest like a shield, and for a moment, everyone thought that was it. The confrontation was over. Maya had won, if speaking truth to power could be called winning, and now she would retreat to her corner table, and life would go on as it always had. But Maya wasn't finished. You asked me what's wrong with me, she said, and now her voice did shake, but not with fear. With anger. With 3 years of accumulated frustration and pain and the particular rage that comes from being invisible until someone decides to make you a spectacle. You asked me why I don't have friends, why I don't talk to anyone, why I'm always alone. She looked around the cafeteria, making eye contact with students who'd sat near her in classes for years without ever learning her name, students who'd borrowed pencils from her and never returned them, students who'd copied her homework and never said thank you, students who'd looked through her like she was made of glass. I'm alone because at some point, I realized that being alone by choice is better than being alone in a crowd. I'm quiet because I learned that most people don't actually want to hear what you have to say, they just want to hear their own thoughts reflected back at them. I draw because art is honest in ways that people rarely are. I observe because when you're not busy performing, you actually see things. Real things. True things. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maya took a deep breath, and when she continued, her voice was softer but no less powerful. Every single person in this cafeteria, I've drawn you. Some of you multiple times. I've drawn you happy, sad, angry, bored, excited, in love, heartbroken. I've drawn you in moments you thought no one was watching. I've drawn you being your real selves, not the versions you perform for everyone else. She opened her sketchbook, flipping through the pages that had been mocked just minutes before. Sarah Martinez, I drew you crying in the bathroom after Jake broke up with you. Not because I was invading your privacy, but because your pain was so raw, so real, that I wanted to honor it. I wanted you to know that someone saw it, someone witnessed it, someone cared enough to preserve that moment, not the sadness, but the strength it took to walk out of that bathroom and face the day anyway. Several students were openly crying now. Sarah Martinez had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. David Chen, I drew you sleeping in the library during your free period because you'd worked the overnight shift at your dad's restaurant. I drew the exhaustion on your face, but also the determination. Because that's heroic, working that hard, sacrificing that much for your family. David, who'd been slouching in his seat, sat up straighter. "Emily Rodriguez, I drew you practicing your speech for debate team, alone in an empty classroom, moving your hands, forming words, so nervous but so prepared. I drew you because I wanted to capture what dedication looks like." Maya continued, flipping through pages, calling out names, describing drawings, and with each one, the cafeteria transformed. What had been a crowd hungry for drama became something else, an audience, yes, but one that was beginning to see itself through Maya's eyes. Beginning to understand that her quiet observation wasn't creepy or stalkerish. It was the opposite. It was seeing people. Really seeing them. "I draw people because people are beautiful," Maya said, her voice breaking now, but she pushed through. "Even when they're cruel. Even when they're broken. Even when they're scared and lashing out because they don't know what else to do. You're all beautiful, and you're all worth preserving, worth remembering, worth seeing." She turned back to Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus, who were still standing there, frozen, unsure how to retreat from a confrontation that had transformed into something they hadn't anticipated. "Even you three," Maya said, and there was no anger in her voice now. Just exhaustion. Just honesty. "Even you are worth seeing. Brandon, I drew you last month, sitting alone in your car in the parking lot before school, and you looked so tired. Not physically tired. Soul tired. Like you were gathering the energy to put on the performance of being Brandon Whitmore for another day. That drawing is on page 47, if you want to see it." Brandon's eyes widened. He remembered that morning. He'd sat in his car for 15 minutes, trying to convince himself to go inside, trying to remember why any of this mattered, trying to figure out who he was supposed to be. He thought he was alone. "Tyler, I drew you helping Mrs. Patterson carry groceries to her car after you saw her struggling in the parking lot. You didn't know anyone was watching. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That's who you are when you're not trying to impress anyone. That's worth seeing too." Tyler's eyes were bright with tears he was desperately trying to hold back. "And Marcus, I drew you visiting your grandfather at the nursing home, reading to him even though he doesn't always remember who you are. You were so patient, so gentle. That's the real you, underneath all the performance." Marcus looked like he'd been struck. That was his private thing, his sacred thing, something he'd never told his friends about because it didn't fit the image, didn't match the persona. Maya closed her sketchbook and hugged it to her chest one more time. "So yes, I'm quiet. Yes, I'm alone. Yes, I spend my lunches drawing instead of talking. But I see you. All of you. I see the best in you, even when you can't see it in yourselves. And I'm sorry if that makes me weird. I'm sorry if that makes you uncomfortable. But I'm not sorry for seeing beauty in the world. I'm not sorry for caring enough to preserve it." The silence that followed was different from the silence that had come before. This wasn't the breathless anticipation of drama. This was the profound quiet of 300 people simultaneously having their world shifted, their perspective challenged, their assumptions questioned. And then, from the back of the cafeteria, someone started clapping. It was Emma Watson, not the actress, but a junior with the same name who'd spent her high school career in the shadow of that coincidence. She stood up, clapping slowly, deliberately, her hands coming together with a sound that echoed off the cafeteria walls. Someone else joined her. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire cafeteria was on its feet, applause thundering through the space like a physical force. 300 students, standing, clapping, and many of them crying, for a girl they'd never really seen until she'd forced them to look. Maya stood frozen, overwhelmed, her sketchbook clutched to her chest, tears finally spilling down her cheeks because this she hadn't prepared for. She'd prepared for mockery. She'd prepared for cruelty. She'd even prepared for indifference. But she hadn't prepared for this. For being seen in return. For having her seeing acknowledged, celebrated, honored. Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus stood in the middle of it all, islands in a sea of applause, and for the first time in their high school careers, they were the ones who felt invisible. They were the ones who didn't know what to do, where to look, how to be. Brandon was the first to move. He stepped forward, and the cafeteria quieted slightly, students sensing that the story wasn't quite finished yet. He stood in front of Maya, this girl he'd tormented minutes ago, this girl who'd just systematically dissected him and put him back together as someone he didn't quite recognize but maybe, possibly, wanted to be. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "I'm sorry, Maya. That's your name, right? Maya?" She nodded, unable to speak, tears still streaming. "I'm sorry," he said again. "You're right. About all of it. I'm terrified. Every single day, I'm terrified that if people knew the real me, the one who sits in his car too scared to face the day, the one who doesn't actually know what he wants or who he is or what he's good at beyond being his father's son, if people knew that version of me, they'd realize I'm nothing special. So I perform. I perform confidence, I perform cruelty, I perform this whole life. And I'm so tired." His voice broke completely. "I'm so tired of being someone I'm not." Tyler stepped forward then, standing beside Brandon. "I'm sorry too. You're right, I do know better. My mom raised me better than this. But I was scared. Scared of losing my place, scared of being on the outside. So I looked away. I always look away. But I don't want to do that anymore." Marcus was last, his usual quick wit completely absent, replaced by something rawer, more real. "I don't even know who I am without the jokes," he admitted. "I've been performing so long that I can't find the real person underneath. But you saw him. Somehow, you saw him. And I'm sorry for calling you creepy, for making fun of your art, for not seeing what you were actually doing." The three boys stood there, exposed and vulnerable in front of the entire school, and Maya looked at them, really looked at them, and saw exactly what she'd always seen. Scared kids playing at being adults, performing confidence they didn't feel, trying to survive high school the only way they knew how. "I forgive you," Maya said quietly. Then, louder, so the whole cafeteria could hear, "I forgive you." It should have been the end. In movies, this is where the credits roll, where everyone learns their lesson and walks away transformed. But real life is messier than movies, and transformation is slower, harder, more complicated. The cafeteria erupted again, but this time with conversation, with movement, with students approaching Maya's corner table like pilgrims to a shrine. They wanted to see the drawings. They wanted to know if she'd drawn them. They wanted to thank her, apologize to her, understand her. Emma Watson reached Maya first. "I'm the one who started clapping," she said, smiling through tears. "I've been the other Emma Watson for 3 years, and I've felt invisible every single day. But if you've drawn me, if you've seen me, could I see it? Could I see myself through your eyes?" Maya, overwhelmed, nodded. She flipped through her sketchbook until she found it, Emma sitting alone in the library, reading, completely absorbed in a book, her face lit with pure joy. The drawing captured something essential, something true. It showed Emma not as the shadow of a famous person, but as herself, complete and whole and beautiful in her own right. Emma started crying harder. "That's me," she whispered. "That's really me. I'd forgotten what I looked like when I wasn't trying to be someone else." More students crowded around. Sarah Martinez found her drawing, not the one of her crying in the bathroom, but another one where she was laughing with her friends, her whole face transformed by joy. David Chen saw himself sleeping in the library, and yes, it showed his exhaustion, but it also showed something else, a young man who worked harder than anyone knew, who sacrificed more than anyone realized, who deserved to be seen and honored for that sacrifice. One by one, students saw themselves. Not the versions they performed for Instagram, not the carefully curated images they presented to the world, but their real selves. The vulnerable, imperfect, beautiful truth of who they were when they forgot to pretend. Miss Patricia Caldwell, the AP English teacher who'd been on lunch duty, had watched the whole scene unfold from her position near the door. She was 63 years old, 3 years from retirement, and she'd seen a lot in her 40 years of teaching. But she'd never seen anything quite like this. She approached Maya slowly, giving the students time to clear a path. "Maya," she said gently. "May I see?" Maya handed her the sketchbook, and Ms. Caldwell flipped through it with the careful reverence it deserved. She found herself on page 72, a drawing from last month, standing at her classroom window during her free period, looking out at the autumn trees with an expression of such profound sadness that it took her breath away. "My husband died 2 years ago," Miss Caldwell said softly. "October was his favorite month. I didn't think anyone noticed that I struggle this time of year. I didn't think anyone saw." "I saw," Maya said simply. Miss Caldwell closed the sketchbook carefully and handed it back. "This isn't just art, Maya. This is documentation. This is history. This is anthropology and psychology and a dozen other things I don't have names for. This is important work. Have you ever thought about art school? About pursuing this?" Maya shook her head. I just draw. I don't think about it beyond that." "Well, you should," Miss Caldwell said firmly. "You should think about it very seriously. Because what you're doing here, seeing people, truly seeing them, that's rare. That's precious. That's a gift that shouldn't be wasted." The lunch period bell rang, the sound jarring everyone back to reality. Students began to disperse reluctantly, still talking, still processing, still fundamentally changed by what they'd witnessed. But they were different now. They looked at each other differently. They looked at Maya differently. They looked at themselves differently. Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus were the last to leave Maya's table. They stood there awkwardly, these 3 boys who'd ruled the school through charisma and cruelty, now humbled and uncertain. "What happens now?" Tyler asked. It was a genuine question, not rhetorical. He really didn't know. Maya shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "I guess we go to 5th period. We finish the school day. We wake up tomorrow and do it all again." "But different," Marcus said. "It has to be different now, right?" "That's up to you," Maya said. "I'm going to keep being me. I'm going to keep sitting at this table. I'm going to keep drawing. The question is, who are you going to be?" The boys didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as they walked away, heading to their respective classes, they carried something with them they hadn't had before. A question. A mirror. A glimpse of who they could be if they stopped performing and started being real. The rest of the school day passed in a blur for Maya. She walked through halls that felt different, even though they looked exactly the same. Students she'd never spoken to smiled at her. Some stopped her to thank her, to ask about her art, to apologize for years of overlooking her. It was overwhelming, this sudden visibility, this transformation from invisible to seen that had happened in the span of a single lunch period. In 5th period chemistry, she sat in her usual seat at the back of the class, but this time, Sarah Martinez slid into the empty seat beside her, a seat that had remained empty for 3 years. "Hey," Sarah said quietly, as their teacher, Mr. Morrison, began setting up a lab demonstration. "I just wanted to say thank you. For seeing me. For drawing me. For honoring my pain instead of gossiping about it." Maya didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long being silent that words still felt foreign, like a language she was just learning to speak. "You don't have to say anything," Sarah continued, seeming to understand. "I just wanted you to know that what you did today, standing up to those guys, showing everyone what you see, it was brave. You're brave." "I don't feel brave," Maya admitted. "I feel terrified." Sarah laughed softly. "Yeah, that's kind of what brave is, I think. Being terrified and doing it anyway." The class proceeded, but Maya couldn't focus. Her mind kept returning to the cafeteria, to the standing ovation, to the look on Brandon's face when she described his drawing, to the weight of 300 pairs of eyes finally seeing her. She'd wanted to be seen her whole life, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure she knew how to handle it. After class, Emma Watson, the other Emma Watson, was waiting in the hallway. "Hey, so, this might be weird, but I'm eating lunch at your table tomorrow." If that's okay. I mean, if you want company. No pressure if you don't, I just thought maybe. Okay, Maya interrupted gently, surprising herself. Yeah, that would be nice. Emma's face lit up. Really? Okay, cool. Great. I'll see you tomorrow then. As Emma walked away, Maya felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, maybe. Or possibility. The beginning of something that might, with time and patience, become friendship. Sixth period English was with Ms. Caldwell, and when Maya walked in, the teacher was waiting for her. Stay after class, Ms. Caldwell said quietly. I want to talk to you about something. The hour crawled by. They were discussing The Great Gatsby, analyzing Fitzgerald's prose, talking about themes of American dreams and empty wealth. Maya usually loved English class, loved the way Miss Caldwell could unpack a text and reveal layers of meaning that weren't visible on first reading. But today, she couldn't concentrate. She kept catching other students glancing at her, kept feeling the weight of their attention, kept wondering what Miss Caldwell wanted to discuss. When the bell rang and the other students filed out, Maya approached Miss Caldwell's desk nervously. Sit, Miss Caldwell said, gesturing to a chair. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling. Do you know that every student in my sixth period class posted about you on social media during lunch? The video of your speech has been shared 217 times. There are students from other schools asking about you, about your art. Maya felt her stomach drop. I didn't want. I wasn't trying to. I know, Miss Caldwell interrupted gently. You weren't trying to go viral. You were trying to defend yourself, to explain yourself. But Maya, whether you intended it or not, you've become a voice. Not just in this school, but beyond it. And I want to talk to you about what you do with that. She pulled out a brochure from her desk drawer. Rhode Island School of Design. It's one of the best art schools in the country. I went there, many years ago, before I decided to teach. They have a program for high school students, a summer intensive for juniors interested in pursuing art seriously. Applications are due in December. Maya took the brochure with trembling hands. I'm not. I don't think I'm good enough for something like this. Maya, look at me. Miss Caldwell's voice was firm but kind. I've been teaching for 40 years. I've seen thousands of students pass through my classroom. Do you know how many of them I've believed had genuine, undeniable talent? Talent that could change things, that could matter? 6. In 40 years, 6 students. You're the 7th. But I just draw what I see, Maya protested. It's not special, it's just observing the human condition with empathy and skill and an artist's eye. Just documenting truth in a world full of performance. Just seeing beauty where others see ordinary? Maya, that's exactly what art is supposed to do. That's exactly what the world needs more of. Maya stared at the brochure, at the glossy images of students in studios, surrounded by canvases and sculptures and the beautiful chaos of creation. It felt like looking at another world, one she'd never imagined herself inhabiting. I can't afford this, Maya said quietly. My parents, we don't have money for fancy art schools. There are scholarships, Ms. Caldwell said. Full scholarships for students with exceptional talent and financial need. And I will write you a recommendation that will make them weep. But Maya, you have to want this. You have to be willing to step out of your corner table and into the world. You have to be willing to be seen. Maya thought about that morning, about sitting in her usual corner, invisible and safe. She thought about the terror of having Brandon grab her sketchbook, the humiliation of being mocked in front of everyone. And then she thought about what came after, the applause, the tears, the connections, the possibility. I'll think about it, Maya said finally. Miss Caldwell smiled. That's all I ask. Just promise me you'll think about it seriously. Don't let fear make this decision for you. As Maya left the classroom, she clutched the brochure like a lifeline. The hallway was mostly empty now, just a few stragglers heading to their last class of the day. But as she turned the corner toward her locker, she nearly collided with Brandon. "Sorry," they said simultaneously, then both stopped, awkward and uncertain. Brandon shifted his weight from foot to foot. "I've been looking for you," he admitted. "I wanted to. I don't know. I wanted to ask you something." "Okay," Maya said cautiously. "That drawing you mentioned. The one of me in my car, looking tired. Could I see it? Could I have a copy of it, maybe?" Maya was surprised. "Why would you want that?" It's not flattering." "That's exactly why I want it," Brandon said. "I've spent my whole life looking at flattering images of myself. Perfect yearbook photos, perfect Instagram posts, perfect everything. But that drawing you described, that moment you captured, that was real. That was true. And I think I need to remember what true looks like." Maya opened her sketchbook, found the page, and carefully tore it out. She'd never removed a drawing from her sketchbook before. They were meant to stay together, a complete record. But this felt important. This felt like the right thing to do. She handed it to Brandon, and he studied it for a long moment. In the drawing, he looked young and lost, sitting behind the steering wheel with his forehead resting on his hands. There was no trace of the confident, cruel boy who ruled the cafeteria. Just a 17-year-old kid who didn't know who he was or who he was supposed to be. "This is who I want to figure out how to be," Brandon said quietly. "Not the performance. Not the mask. This person. The real one." "That's going to be hard," Maya said honestly. "Yeah," Brandon agreed. "Yeah, it is. But maybe hard is what I need. Maybe hard is what we all need." He carefully folded the drawing and put it in his pocket. "Thank you, Maya. For seeing me. Even when I didn't want to be seen." He walked away, and Maya stood there for a moment, processing the strangeness of the day. 12 hours ago, Brandon Whitmore hadn't known her name. Now he was thanking her for seeing him, for understanding him, for offering him a glimpse of truth. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from her mother asking if she was okay, if she needed to be picked up early. Word had spread beyond the school, apparently. Parents had been calling, concerned and confused about videos their children were sharing, about some confrontation in the cafeteria. Maya texted back, "I'm fine. Better than fine. I'll tell you everything when I get home." Seventh period was art, appropriately enough, with Mr. Chen, no relation to David or Maya herself. It was the one class where Maya had always felt comfortable, where her silence was expected, even valued. Artists were supposed to be quiet, contemplative, lost in their work. But today, when she walked in, the entire class erupted in applause. Mr. Chen, a small man in his 50s with paint perpetually under his fingernails, was clapping the loudest. "Our very own celebrity," he said, grinning. Maya Chen, the artist who brought an entire cafeteria to tears. Sit. We have much to discuss." Maya sat at her usual spot by the window, and Mr. Chen perched on the edge of his desk, studying her with the same intensity she usually reserved for her subjects. "I've always known you were talented," he said. "Your technical skill is exceptional for your age. But today, I learned something new about your work. I learned that you have the most important quality an artist can possess. You have something to say. You have a perspective. You see the world in a way that others don't, and you have the courage to share that vision." He pulled out his own phone, showed her the video that had been circulating. Maya watched herself, small, quiet Maya, standing up to 3 boys who'd tormented her, speaking truth with a clarity and power she hadn't known she possessed. "This is what separates good art from great art," Mr. Chen continued. "Technical skill can be taught. Perspective, vision, the courage to see and speak truth, that comes from somewhere else. That's innate. And Maya, you have it in abundance." He walked to a cabinet and pulled out a large portfolio case. "I want you to do something for me. I want you to select your 20 best drawings, not the ones you think are most technically perfect, but the ones that mean something, that say something. I want you to put together a portfolio." "For what?" Maya asked. For everything, Mr. Chen said. For college applications, for scholarship applications, for yourself. Because Maya, whether you realize it or not, you're an artist. Not someone who draws as a hobby. An artist. And artists need portfolios. He handed her the case. Take this home. Fill it with your truth. And then we'll talk about your future. The final bell rang, and students began packing up. But before Maya could leave, David Chen, the one who'd been working overnight shifts at his father's restaurant, approached her. "Hey," he said shyly. "I just wanted to say, that drawing you mentioned, of me sleeping in the library. No one else knows about the job, about how tired I am. I've been hiding it because I didn't want people to feel sorry for me or think I'm poor or whatever. But you saw it, and you didn't judge it. You honored it. It means a lot. Your hard work should be honored," Maya said simply. "You're doing something incredible, balancing school and work and family. That deserves to be seen." David blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. "My parents came here from China with nothing. They work 18-hour days so I can have opportunities they never had. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing them because I'm so tired, because my grades aren't perfect, because I fall asleep in the library instead of studying. But when you described that drawing, you called it heroic. No one's ever called anything I do heroic before." "It is heroic," Maya insisted. "Showing up, working hard, sacrificing for the people you love, that's the definition of heroic." After David left, Maya gathered her things slowly, processing the weight of the day. She'd woken up that morning expecting another day of invisibility, another day of quiet observation from her corner table. Instead, she'd been thrust into visibility, into confrontation, into connection. And the strangest part was that she wasn't sure she wanted to go back to invisibility, even though visibility was terrifying. The walk home from school usually took Maya 20 minutes, and she treasured that time, the transition from the noise and chaos of Lincoln High to the quiet sanctuary of her bedroom. But today, the walk was interrupted every few blocks by students she barely knew, offering words of encouragement, asking about her art, sharing their own stories of feeling invisible or misunderstood. By the time she reached her house, a modest 2-story home in a neighborhood of similar modest homes, she was exhausted. Emotionally, physically, spiritually exhausted. She wanted nothing more than to retreat to her room, to process everything in the silence and solitude she'd always preferred. But her mother was waiting at the door. Jennifer Chen was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with the kind of quiet strength that Maya had inherited. She worked as a nurse at the county hospital, often pulling double shifts, and she'd raised Maya mostly alone after her husband had died when Maya was 8. She understood hard work. She understood sacrifice. And she understood her daughter in ways that Maya was only beginning to appreciate. "Come," she said simply, opening her arms. Maya fell into her mother's embrace and finally, let herself cry. Not the few tears that had escaped in the cafeteria, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place she'd kept locked away for years. All the loneliness, all the fear, all the desperate hope that someday, somehow, someone would see her, it all came pouring out in her mother's arms. Jennifer didn't ask questions. She just held her daughter, stroking her hair, making soft soothing sounds in Mandarin, the language of comfort and home. When the crying finally subsided, she led Maya to the kitchen table and made tea, proper Chinese tea, the kind that required patience and ritual and attention. "Tell me," Jennifer said simply, setting a delicate cup in front of Maya. And Maya told her. Everything. The mocking, the confrontation, the speech she'd given without planning to give it, the standing ovation, the conversations afterward, the sudden visibility that felt both wonderful and terrifying. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her face revealing nothing, her hands wrapped around her own teacup. When Maya finished, Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, disappeared into her bedroom, and returned carrying an old photo album. "I've never shown you this," she said, opening it to a page near the middle. The photographs were faded, taken in the 1990s, and they showed a young woman, Maya's mother, but younger, different, more uncertain, standing in what looked like an art gallery, surrounded by paintings. "I was an artist," Jennifer said quietly. "Before I met your father, before I became a nurse, before I became a mother. I painted. I had a small gallery show in San Francisco. Critics said I had promise, that I saw the world in unique ways." Maya stared at the photographs, then at her mother, shocked. "You never told me." "I know," Jennifer said. "After your father died, I put it all away. I had to focus on practical things, keeping a roof over our heads, food on the table, you clothed and healthy and educated. Art felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. So I became a nurse. Good, stable work. Important work. Work that pays bills and provides benefits." She traced her finger over one of the photographs. "But I've watched you these past few years, filling sketchbook after sketchbook, and I've seen myself. The same drive, the same need to capture truth, to see beauty, to document the world. And I've been afraid." "Afraid of what?" Maya asked. "Afraid that you'd make the same mistake I did," Jennifer said, looking directly at her daughter. "Afraid that you'd let fear or practicality or other people's expectations convince you to put your gift away. Afraid that 30 years from now, you'd be sitting at a kitchen table showing your own daughter photographs of what you could have been." She closed the album and took both of Maya's hands in hers. "What you did today, standing up to those boys, sharing your truth, refusing to apologize for seeing beauty in the world, that took courage I never had. You are braver than I ever was. And I don't want you to waste that courage. I don't want you to hide your light because hiding feels safer." Maya felt tears building again. "Ms. Caldwell gave me information about an art program. A summer intensive at a fancy school. But it's expensive, and we don't have that kind of money, and I don't want you to work extra shifts just so I can." "Stop," Jennifer interrupted firmly. "Let me worry about money. That's my job, not yours. Your job is to be 17 years old and talented and brave. Your job is to apply to that program and any other program that might help you become the artist you're meant to be. Do you understand?" "But..." "No buts," Jennifer said. "I gave up my art. I made that choice, and I don't regret it because it gave me you, it gave me a stable life, it gave me purpose. But you don't have to make the same choice. You can have art and stability. You can have your truth and a life built around it. That's what I want for you. That's what I've always wanted for you." They sat in silence for a moment, drinking their tea, and Maya felt something shift inside her. A permission she hadn't known she'd been waiting for. A blessing to be fully herself, to pursue her gift without guilt or apology. "There's something else," Maya said, pulling out her phone. She showed her mother the video, watched her watch the speech, saw the pride and concern and love that crossed her face. "You're famous," Jennifer said when it ended. "I don't want to be famous," Maya said. "I just wanted my sketchbook back." Jennifer laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine. "That's exactly right. That's exactly what makes you special. You weren't performing. You weren't trying to make a moment. You were just defending what mattered to you. That's authentic. That's real. And people respond to real." She stood, began preparing dinner, simple stir-fry, vegetables and rice, the kind of meal they'd shared 1,000 times. But tonight it felt different. Tonight it felt like celebration. "Tomorrow will be different," Jennifer said as she chopped vegetables with practiced efficiency. "More people will have seen the video. More people will want to talk to you, to know you, to be your friend. Some of them will be genuine. Some of them will just want to be close to someone momentarily famous. You'll need to learn to tell the difference." "How?" Maya asked. "The same way you always have," Jennifer said. "By watching. By observing. By seeing who people really are, not who they pretend to be. You have a gift for that, Maya. Don't lose it just because people are paying attention now." That night, after dinner, Maya sat in her bedroom surrounded by 17 sketchbooks, her complete anthropological study of Lincoln High School. She opened them one by one, looking at her own evolution as an artist, seeing how her skill had grown, how her understanding had deepened, how her empathy had expanded. In the first sketchbook, from freshman year, the drawings were technically proficient but surface level. She'd captured what people looked like but not who they were. By the third or fourth sketchbook, she'd begun to see deeper, to capture emotion, to reveal character, to show truth. And in the most recent books, she'd achieved something else entirely. She'd learned to see not just who people were in the moment, but who they were becoming, who they could be. She thought about Mr. Chen's assignment: choose 20 drawings for a portfolio. 20 drawings that meant something, that said something. How could she possibly choose? Each drawing was a moment, a truth, a person seen and honored. How could she decide which truths mattered most? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Emma Watson." The other one. "Just wanted to say I'm serious about lunch tomorrow. I'll bring extra cookies. See you then." Then another text, this one from Sarah Martinez. "Thank you again for today. I've been thinking about what you said, about honoring pain. I've been so ashamed of my sadness, like it made me weak. But you saw strength in it. That changes things. That changes everything." And another, from David Chen. "My parents saw the video. They cried. They said they were proud of me, proud of the work I do. I never thought they noticed. But you noticed. Thank you for noticing." Messages kept coming. Students she'd never spoken to, sharing their stories, their gratitude, their own struggles with invisibility and the hunger to be seen. Each message was a small miracle, a connection formed through art and truth and the simple act of paying attention. Maya realized something profound. She'd spent 3 years documenting other people's lives because she'd felt like she wasn't living one of her own. She'd watched and drawn and observed because participation felt impossible, because connection felt like a foreign language she couldn't speak. But tonight, reading these messages, she understood that observation was participation. Seeing was connecting. Her quiet documentation had been an act of love all along. She picked up her newest sketchbook and turned to a blank page. And for the first time in 3 years, she drew herself. It wasn't easy. Artists rarely want to turn their gaze inward, to see themselves as clearly as they see others. But Maya forced herself to be honest. She drew herself sitting at her corner table, sketchbook open, pencil in hand. But she didn't draw herself as invisible or isolated. Instead, she drew herself as she was beginning to understand herself, as someone who saw beauty, who honored truth, who connected with the world through art even when words failed. Wednesday morning dawned cold and bright, autumn sunlight streaming through Maya's bedroom window and illuminating the self-portrait she'd completed late the night before. She studied it critically in the morning light, and for once, she didn't see all the technical flaws, all the ways it could be better. Instead, she saw honesty. She saw herself. Getting ready for school felt different. Maya found herself paying attention to things she normally ignored, choosing a shirt that wasn't just comfortable but that she actually liked, spending an extra minute on her hair, even putting on the small silver earrings her grandmother had given her before she died. She wasn't trying to transform herself, wasn't trying to become someone else. But she was acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that being seen might not be entirely terrible. Her mother was waiting in the kitchen with breakfast, something she rarely had time for on workdays. "Big day," Jennifer said, sliding scrambled eggs onto a plate. "Are you ready?" "I don't know what I'm ready for," Maya admitted. "I don't know what today is going to be." "No one ever does," Jennifer said. "That's what makes it interesting." The drive to school, Jennifer had insisted on driving her instead of letting her walk, was quiet. But it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that exists between people who understand each other well enough that words aren't always necessary. "Maya," Jennifer said as they pulled into the school parking lot. "Whatever happens today, remember this: you didn't ask to be visible. But now that you are, you get to decide what to do with that visibility. You can use it to help others be seen too. Or you can retreat back into your corner. Both choices are valid. Both choices are yours to make." Maya nodded, clutching her sketchbook to her chest like she always did, like armor against the world. The moment she stepped into the school hallway, she knew everything had changed. Students who'd never acknowledged her existence were suddenly waving, calling her name, asking how she was doing. Some wanted to show her their own art, inspired by her speech to try drawing or painting or photography. Others wanted to share their stories, to tell her about their own struggles with invisibility or their own observations of the world around them. It was overwhelming. Wonderful and terrifying and completely overwhelming. Emma Watson was waiting at Maya's locker, as promised, holding a plastic container of homemade chocolate chip cookies. "I wasn't sure if you actually meant it," Emma said, smiling. "About me sitting with you at lunch. People sometimes say things in the moment and then regret them later." "I meant it," Maya said, and found that she did. The idea of having company at her corner table, of sharing her space with someone who understood the particular loneliness of being overshadowed by someone else's fame, felt right. First period was history, and Mr. Bradley, a teacher who'd never seemed to notice Maya in 3 years of classes, asked her to stay after the bell rang. "I saw the video," he said once they were alone. "And I've been thinking about it all night. How many students like you have I overlooked over the years? How many quiet, brilliant kids have sat in my classroom, and I never really saw them because they weren't loud or disruptive or obviously struggling." He looked genuinely distressed, this middle-aged man who'd been teaching for 20 years, confronting the possibility that he'd been failing students he'd never even noticed. "You didn't do anything wrong," Maya said quietly. "I chose to be invisible. I chose my corner seat. I chose to observe instead of participate." "But why did you feel you had to choose that?" Mr. Bradley asked. "What in my classroom, in this school, in our culture, made you feel like invisibility was your only option?" Maya didn't have an answer. Or rather, she had too many answers, 1,000 small moments over 3 years that had taught her that being quiet was easier than being heard, that observing was safer than engaging, that invisibility was a form of protection. "I want to do better," Mr. Bradley said. "Not just with you, but with all the students I might be overlooking. Would you be willing to help me with that? Maybe talk to my classes about observation, about what you see that I'm missing?" The idea terrified Maya. Standing in front of a class, speaking about her art, her perspective, her observations, it was the opposite of everything she'd trained herself to be. But it was also an opportunity. A chance to use her gift not just to document but to change, to help create a world where other quiet kids didn't have to choose between invisibility and survival. "I'll think about it," Maya said, echoing what she'd told Ms. Caldwell about the art program. Second period, third period, fourth period, each class brought more attention, more questions, more people wanting to connect with the girl who'd been invisible for so long. Some of it felt genuine. Some of it felt opportunistic, like people wanting to be friends with someone momentarily famous. Maya tried to follow her mother's advice, watching and observing, using her gift to see who people really were beneath their attempts to connect. By the time lunch rolled around, Maya was exhausted. She'd spoken more in one morning than she typically spoke in a week. Her voice felt raw, her social energy completely depleted. All she wanted was her corner table, her sketchbook, and the comfortable solitude she'd known for 3 years. But when she entered the cafeteria, she found her corner table occupied. Emma Watson was already there, as promised, arranging cookies on napkins. But she wasn't alone. Sarah Martinez sat beside her, and David Chen, and 3 other students Maya recognized from her drawings but had never spoken to. They'd pulled extra chairs to her table, expanding her corner, transforming her solitary space into something else entirely. "We hope this is okay," Emma said, slightly anxious. "We just thought, we've all felt invisible in our own ways. And after hearing you talk yesterday, we wanted to maybe be invisible together? Or visible together? I don't know, it seemed to make more sense in my head." Maya stood there, tray in hand, facing a choice. She could reclaim her solitude, could ask them politely to leave, could retreat to the safety of being alone. Or she could sit down, could accept this offering of connection, could risk the vulnerability of letting people in. She sat down. "Tell me about yourselves," she said, opening her sketchbook to a fresh page. "Not the versions you perform for everyone else. The real versions. The ones you hide." And they did. Emma talked about the burden of sharing a name with someone famous, how she'd felt like a joke her entire life, a cosmic prank where she was the punchline. Sarah talked about her breakup, about the shame she felt for being sad, for not being strong enough to just move on. David talked about his family, the pressure he felt to justify their sacrifices, the guilt that came with exhaustion. One by one, they shared their truths, and Maya drew. But this time, she drew with them watching, let them see her process, her observation, her translation of truth into art. And when she showed them the sketches, honest, empathetic, seeing them as they saw themselves, some of them cried. "This is what you've been doing," Emma said, wonder in her voice. "For 3 years, you've been seeing all of us like this. Seeing us as we really are." "Yes," Maya said simply. "That must be exhausting," David said. "Carrying all that truth, all that observation, all by yourself." Maya had never thought about it that way, but he was right. It had been exhausting. Witnessing everyone's humanity, their pain, their joy, their truth, and having no one to share it with, no one to help carry the weight of all that seeing. "Maybe you don't have to carry it alone anymore," Sarah suggested gently. "Maybe we can help. Maybe we can see each other." Before Maya could respond, a shadow fell across their table. She looked up to find Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus standing there, trays in hand, looking uncertain and awkward and nothing like the confident rulers of the cafeteria they'd been just 24 hours ago. "Is there room?" Brandon asked quietly. Not demanding, not assuming, just asking. The table was already crowded, chairs pulled in tight to accommodate the unexpected gathering. But Emma stood up, grabbed an extra chair from a nearby table, and the others shifted to make room. "There's room," Maya said. The boys sat down, and for a moment, no one spoke. The cafeteria continued its usual chaos around them, but at this corner table, there was a pocket of quiet, of uncertainty, of possibility. "I don't really know how to do this," Brandon finally said. "How to be real. How to stop performing. I've been thinking about it all night, about that drawing, about who I am when I'm not trying to impress anyone. And I realized I don't actually know." "So figure it out," Emma said, and there was no judgment in her voice, just matter-of-fact encouragement. "That's what we're all doing here. Figuring out who we are when we stop trying to be who we think we should be." Tyler set down his tray and looked directly at Maya. "I've been looking away my whole life. From cruelty, from injustice, from anything uncomfortable. My mom always taught me to stand up for what's right, but I was too scared of losing my place, my friends, my status. Yesterday, when you called me out on that, it was like you held up a mirror and showed me something I'd been pretending not to see." "So what are you going to do about it?" David asked. "I don't know yet," Tyler admitted. "But I'm not looking away anymore. That's a start, right?" Marcus had been quiet, unusual for someone who typically filled every silence with jokes and commentary. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than Maya had ever heard it. "My grandfather died last week," he said. "The one I used to visit, the one Maya drew me reading to. And at the funeral, people kept telling me to be strong, to celebrate his life instead of mourning, to remember the good times. But I just wanted to be sad. I wanted to fall apart. And I didn't let myself because I've spent so long being the funny one, the one who makes things lighter, that I've forgotten how to just feel." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "You can be sad here," she said. "We've all been sad here. That's kind of the point." And Marcus, who'd built an entire identity around being the one who made others laugh, let himself cry. The cafeteria continued around them, but their table had become its own world. A space where truth was valued more than performance, where vulnerability was strength, where seeing and being seen was the currency of connection. Maya drew them all. Not separately, but together. A single sketch that captured this moment, 8 students from completely different worlds, brought together by a confrontation that had started with cruelty and transformed into something else entirely. She drew their hands on the table, some touching, some separate but nearby. She drew their faces, each one showing a different emotion but all of them showing honesty. She drew the cookies Emma had brought, the untouched food on their trays, the sketchbook that had started everything. When she showed them the drawing, Emma whispered, "That's us. That's really us. That's who we could be," Maya corrected gently. "If we keep choosing truth over performance. If we keep seeing each other." The rest of lunch passed in conversation, real conversation, not the performative kind that fills most high school cafeterias. They talked about their fears, their dreams, the disconnect between who their parents expected them to be and who they were actually becoming. They talked about college anxieties, relationship complications, family pressures. And Maya, who'd spent 3 years listening without participating, found herself talking too. Sharing her own struggles with social anxiety, her complicated relationship with visibility, her dreams of art school that she'd barely admitted to herself. When the lunch bell rang, no one wanted to leave. They'd found something rare and precious, a space where they could be fully themselves, and the thought of returning to their regular performances felt impossible. "Same time tomorrow?" Emma asked, and everyone nodded. "But maybe we need a bigger table," David added, looking at how tightly they'd been squeezed together. As they dispersed to their afternoon classes, Maya felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Miss Caldwell, who'd been observing from her lunch duty post near the door. "You're building something special," Miss Caldwell said. "Do you realize that? You're creating a community of truth-tellers in a world that rewards performance. That's radical. That's important." "I just invited people to sit with me," Maya protested. "No," Miss Caldwell corrected. "You invited people to be themselves with you. That's entirely different. That's transformative." Fifth period chemistry passed in a blur. Maya couldn't focus on molecular structures and chemical reactions. Her mind kept returning to the lunch table, to the conversations, to the feeling of being part of something instead of just observing it. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. After class, Sarah caught up with her in the hallway. "Hey, so I was thinking. You know how you see all of us so clearly, how you draw these truths about who we are. Maybe you should teach other people to see that way too." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "Like, a workshop or something. An after-school thing where you teach people to really observe, to see beyond the surface, to capture truth in their art." "I don't know, maybe it's a stupid idea." "It's not stupid," Maya interrupted. It's interesting. I've never thought about teaching before." "You're already teaching," Sarah pointed out. "Every time you show someone one of your drawings, every time you explain what you saw in them, you're teaching them to see themselves differently. Why not make it official?" The idea planted itself in Maya's mind like a seed. She'd spent 3 years developing her gift for observation in solitude. What if she could help others develop that gift too? What if she could create more people who saw beauty in the ordinary, who honored truth over performance, who witnessed the world with empathy and skill? Sixth period English brought another surprise. When Maya walked in, she found her self-portrait, the one she'd drawn the night before, projected on the screen at the front of the classroom. Miss Caldwell stood beside it, and when all the students were seated, she addressed the class. "This is Maya Chen's self-portrait," she said. "And I want to talk about what makes it extraordinary. Look at how she's drawn herself, not glamorized, not diminished, just honest. She's at her table, doing what she does, being who she is. There's no apology in this image. No justification. Just existence." She zoomed in on different parts of the drawing, pointing out technical elements, the use of light and shadow, the careful attention to detail, the way Maya had captured the intensity of her own focus. "But what makes this truly special," Ms. Caldwell continued, "is that it's a perfect example of the artist's gaze turning inward. Maya has spent years documenting all of you. Now she's finally documenting herself. And in doing so, she's claiming her own space, her own truth, her own right to be seen. Maya sat in her usual seat, feeling exposed and vulnerable as her classmates studied her self-portrait. But Ms. Caldwell wasn't done. "I'm assigning a new project," she announced. Inspired by Maya, "I want each of you to create your own self-portrait. Not a photograph, not a selfie, but a piece of art that captures who you really are when you stop performing. It can be a drawing, a painting, a collage, a poem, a short film, whatever medium speaks to you. But it has to be honest. It has to be true." The class groaned, not because they didn't want to do it, but because honest self-reflection is hard, uncomfortable, requiring the kind of vulnerability most people spend their lives avoiding. "Maya will be available to help anyone who wants guidance," Ms. Caldwell added, and Maya's head snapped up in surprise. They hadn't discussed this. "She's agreed to hold office hours in the art room after school twice a week, for anyone who wants to learn to see the way she sees." Maya wanted to protest that she hadn't agreed to any such thing, but then she caught Ms. Caldwell's eye and saw the challenge there. This was a test. Could Maya step into visibility not just as someone observed, but as someone who leads? As someone who teaches? As someone who actively shapes the world instead of just documenting it? Maya took a deep breath and nodded. "Tuesdays and Thursdays," she heard herself say. "After school in the art room. Bring your attempts at self-portraits, and I'll help you see yourself more clearly." After class, Ms. Caldwell pulled her aside. "I hope you don't mind that I volunteered you," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "But Maya, you have a gift, and gifts are meant to be shared. You can't keep your way of seeing to yourself. The world needs it too badly." "What if I'm not good at teaching?" Maya asked. "What if I can't explain how I see things?" "Then you'll learn," Ms. Caldwell said simply. "That's how growth works. You try, you fail, you adjust, you try again. You've been doing it with your art for years. Now you're just applying it to a different skill." 7th period art was a revelation. Mr. Chen had told the class about Maya's upcoming office hours, and half the students had already signed up. More than that, they'd started bringing their own observational sketches to class, drawings of their families, their friends, their own quiet moments. The energy in the room had shifted. Instead of just completing assignments, students were trying to see, really see, the way Maya did. "You've started a movement," Mr. Chen said, watching his students work with an intensity he hadn't seen in years of teaching. "They want to see the world the way you do. They want to capture truth the way you do." "I just draw what I see," Maya said, but even as she said it, she knew it was no longer quite true. She wasn't just drawing anymore. She was teaching, leading, inspiring. She was using her visibility to create change. During the work period, a freshman named Sophie approached Maya's table nervously. "I saw your speech," she said quietly. "The video. And I just wanted you to know that I'm like you. I sit alone at lunch. I watch people. I draw sometimes, but I'm not very good. And seeing you stand up to those guys, seeing you refuse to apologize for who you are, it made me think maybe I don't have to apologize either." Maya looked at this young girl, maybe 14 years old, standing at the beginning of high school with all its complications and cruelties ahead of her. She saw herself 4 years ago, trying to figure out how to survive, how to maintain her authenticity in a world that demanded performance. "You don't have to apologize," Maya said firmly. "Not for being quiet, not for being different, not for seeing the world in your own way. But Sophie, you also don't have to be alone. There are others like us. Maybe not many, but they're there. And if you can find them, if you can build your own corner table community, high school becomes survivable. Maybe even good." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Could I come to your office hours? Could you teach me to draw the way you do?" "Yes," Maya said. "Absolutely yes." After school, instead of heading straight home like she usually did, Maya went to the art room. She told students they could find her there Tuesdays and Thursdays, but she hadn't expected anyone to show up on a Wednesday. She just needed space to process everything, to sit with her sketchbook in the one place that had always felt safe. But when she arrived, she found the art room already occupied. Brandon sat at one of the work tables, a blank sketchbook in front of him, looking lost and frustrated. "Hey," he said when he saw her. "I know it's not Tuesday or Thursday, but I was hoping. I bought this sketchbook. I thought maybe I could try to see things the way you do, try to capture something real. But I don't know where to start." Maya set down her bag and sat across from him. "Why do you want to draw?" Brandon was quiet for a long moment. "Because you're right. I've spent my whole life performing, being who my father wants me to be, who my friends expect me to be, who I think I'm supposed to be. And I don't actually know who I am underneath all that. I thought maybe if I could learn to observe the way you do, if I could learn to see truth, I might find myself in there somewhere." It was the most honest thing Maya had ever heard Brandon say. "Okay," she said, pulling the sketchbook toward her and flipping to the first page. "Start with something simple. Draw your hand. Not the way you think a hand should look, but your actual hand. Look at it. Really look. See the calluses, the scars, the way your fingers curve, the lines in your palm. Don't draw a hand. Draw your hand." Brandon picked up a pencil and began to draw, his movements uncertain, unpracticed. Maya watched, offering occasional guidance. "Look longer before you draw, trust what you see, not what you think should be there, it's okay if it's not perfect. Perfect isn't the goal. Truth is." After 20 minutes, Brandon had produced a rough sketch of his hand. It wasn't technically proficient, the proportions were slightly off, the shading uneven. But it was honest. It captured something real. "It's terrible," Brandon said, but there was wonder in his voice. "It's true," Maya corrected. "That's your hand. That's a part of you, documented honestly. That's not terrible. That's brave." Brandon stared at his drawing, and Maya saw something shift in his expression. "I've never made anything before," he realized. "I've never created anything, never contributed anything. I've just existed. Consumed. Performed. But this terrible drawing of my hand, I made this. It didn't exist before, and now it does because I created it." "Welcome to art," Maya said, smiling. "Welcome to seeing." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Brandon continuing to sketch, his other hand, his shoe, the art supplies on the table, while Maya worked on her portfolio, selecting drawings for the Rhode Island School of Design application. She decided to apply. Decided to take the risk, to pursue the dream, to use her gift fully instead of hiding it. "Maya," Brandon said eventually, not looking up from his sketchbook. "I'm sorry. Not just for yesterday in the cafeteria, but for 3 years of not seeing you. For 3 years of walking past you like you were invisible. You were documenting all of us, seeing all of us, honoring all of us with your art. And we couldn't even be bothered to learn your name." "You know it now," Maya said simply. "Yeah," Brandon agreed. "I know it now." Tyler appeared in the doorway, looking surprised to find them there. "Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," Maya said. "Come in." Tyler entered hesitantly, and Maya noticed he was carrying a notebook. "I can't draw," he admitted. "But I thought maybe I could try writing. Try to capture truth with words instead of pictures. Is that allowed?" "Art isn't about following rules," Maya said. "It's about finding your way of seeing and sharing it with the world. If writing is your way, then write." Tyler sat down at the table with them, opened his notebook, and began to write. And Maya realized what was happening. Her corner table was expanding beyond the cafeteria, beyond lunch period. She was building a community of truth seekers, of people trying to see themselves and each other more clearly. More students trickled in over the next hour. Sarah with paints, wanting to try color instead of just sketching. David with a camera, wanting to capture moments the way Maya did but through photography. Emma with clay, wanting to sculpt her truth instead of drawing it. Marcus with a guitar, wanting to write songs about reality instead of performing jokes. And Sophie, the freshman, who sat quietly in the corner and drew, occasionally asking Maya for guidance, for permission to see, for assurance that her way of moving through the world was valid. Mr. Chen stopped by his classroom to grab some supplies and found it transformed into an impromptu art collective. He stood in the doorway, watching his students work, and caught Maya's eye. "This is what art is supposed to be," he said quietly. "Not assignments and grades and following directions. But people coming together to see, to create, to share truth. You've given them permission to be artists, Maya. Real artists." By the time they left, the sun setting, casting orange light through the art room windows, Maya's portfolio was complete. 20 drawings, each one a truth, each one a moment of seeing and being seen. She had pieces of Brandon's existential crisis, Sarah's heartbreak, David's exhaustion, Emma's identity struggle, and dozens of others. A complete anthropological study of Lincoln High, yes. But more than that, a love letter to the human experience in all its messy, complicated, beautiful reality. Thursday morning brought unexpected news. Maya arrived at school to find Principal Morrison waiting by the entrance, and for a moment, she panicked. Had she done something wrong? Was having students in the art room after hours a violation of some rule she didn't know about? "Miss Chen," Principal Morrison said, and his voice was kind, not stern. "Could you come to my office, please?" Maya followed him through the hallways, her heart hammering. Principal Morrison was a tall man in his 50s, someone she'd never interacted with directly in 3 years at Lincoln High. Why would she have? She'd never been in trouble, never been remarkable enough to warrant administrative attention. His office was exactly what she'd expected: diplomas on the walls, filing cabinets, a desk covered in papers and a computer monitor showing what looked like attendance records. But what surprised her was who else was there: her mother, Miss Caldwell, and Mr. Chen. "Sit down, Maya," Principal Morrison said, gesturing to a chair. "You're not in trouble. In fact, quite the opposite." Maya sat, confused, looking between the adults in the room. "Your video," Principal Morrison began, "the one from Tuesday's cafeteria incident, has now been viewed over 50,000 times. It's been shared by art educators, psychologists, anti-bullying advocates, and media outlets. The district superintendent called me yesterday. So did a reporter from the local news station. So did 3 different art schools." Maya felt dizzy. 50,000 views. She couldn't even conceptualize that number of people. But more importantly, Principal Morrison continued, it started conversations. Real conversations about how we see students, how we value different types of intelligence and talent, how we handle bullying and social dynamics. You've exposed something in our culture, Maya. Something that needed exposing. "I just wanted my sketchbook back," Maya said weakly. Her mother reached over and took her hand. "I know, baby. But sometimes when we stand up for ourselves, we stand up for others too. Whether we mean to or not." Miss Caldwell leaned forward. "The reason we asked you here is that we have a proposal. Several proposals, actually. First, the local news station wants to do a story on you and your art. Second, the district is interested in implementing an art therapy program based on your observational techniques. And third," she paused, smiling, "you've been invited to present your work at a regional art education conference next month." Maya's head was spinning. I can't. That's too much." "You don't have to do any of it," Mr. Chen said gently. "These are opportunities, not obligations. We wanted to present them to you all at once so you can think about what feels right, what aligns with who you are and what you want." "What I want," Maya said slowly, "is to keep drawing. I want to keep seeing people. I want to help others learn to see too. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be a spokesperson or a symbol or whatever people are trying to make me into." "Then don't be," her mother said firmly. "You get to set boundaries, Maya. You get to decide how visible you want to be." Principal Morrison nodded. "We'll handle the media requests. We'll decline the news story if you want. But I do think the art education conference could be valuable. Not for fame, but because there are teachers there who want to learn your techniques, who want to help students the way you've helped students here. You could make a real difference. Maya thought about Sophie, the freshman who'd approached her yesterday. She thought about all the quiet, observant kids in schools everywhere, kids who felt invisible, kids who needed permission to see the world in their own way. "I'll do the conference," she said. "But not alone. I want to bring some of my students, the ones who've been coming to office hours, who've been learning to see. I want to show that this isn't just about me. It's about creating communities of observation, of truth-telling, of seeing each other." The adults exchanged glances. "That's actually perfect," Ms. Caldwell said. "That's exactly the message we should be sending." The meeting ended with plans being made, logistics discussed, permissions secured. But as Maya left the office with her mother, she felt overwhelmed again. "It's too much," she said. "Everything is changing too fast. 3 days ago I was invisible. Now I'm being asked to present at conferences and start programs and be some kind of leader. I don't know how to be a leader." Jennifer stopped in the empty hallway and turned to face her daughter. "Do you know what leadership really is? It's not being the loudest or the most confident. It's not having all the answers. Leadership is seeing something that needs to change and having the courage to try to change it, even when you're scared. Leadership is using whatever gifts you have to help others. You've been leading since Tuesday, Maya. You just didn't recognize it." By lunchtime, Maya's corner table had evolved again. Now there were 2 tables pushed together to accommodate the growing group. Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus sat with Emma, Sarah, David, and Sophie. But there were new faces too, students who'd seen the video, who'd heard about the after-school art sessions, who wanted to be part of this community of truth seekers. "We need a name," Marcus said suddenly. "Every movement needs a name." "We're not a movement," Maya protested. "Yes we are," Emma said. "Whether you want to be or not, you've started something. People are joining because they want what we have, a space to be real." They debated names for a while. The Truth Tellers. The Observers. The Corner Table Club. Everything felt too formal, too organized, too unlike the organic thing they'd become. "What if we don't have a name?" Sophie suggested quietly. "What if we just are? Names create labels, labels create expectations, expectations create performance. Maybe the whole point is to just exist without defining it." Everyone fell silent, considering this. "The freshman is wise," Tyler said, smiling at Sophie. "We just are." "That's perfect." Lunch conversation that day centered around the upcoming conference. Maya had told the group about the invitation, and they were enthusiastically planning what to present, how to demonstrate their techniques, what story to tell about their transformation from performers to truth tellers. "We should show the before and after," Brandon suggested. "Show who we were pretending to be, and who we actually are underneath." "I could write something," Tyler offered. "About looking away and learning to look at. About the courage it takes to see truth when lies are easier." "I could bring my photographs," David said. "I've been documenting our after-school sessions. The concentration on people's faces when they're really observing, really trying to capture truth. It's beautiful." Plans began to form, organic and collaborative. Maya realized she wasn't creating this alone, she was facilitating it. The difference was crucial. She'd sparked something, yes, but now it belonged to all of them. They were all leaders, all teachers, all students of seeing. After lunch, Maya had a free period. She usually spent it in the library, sketching, but today she decided to walk the halls, to observe the school with fresh eyes. How had visibility changed her perception? Did she see things differently now that she was seen? She found herself in the freshman hallway, watching young students navigate their first year of high school. She saw the performers, kids trying too hard to be cool, to fit in, to be noticed. She saw the invisible ones, kids like she'd been, hugging the walls, trying to take up as little space as possible. And she saw the in-between kids, kids who hadn't yet decided who they were going to be, who were still figuring out their role in the complex social ecosystem of high school. Sophie appeared beside her, also on a free period. It's strange, isn't it, the freshman said. Seeing them now, after we've learned to see differently. I look at them and I want to tell them they don't have to choose. They don't have to be performers or invisible. They can just be. Maybe that's what we do, Maya said slowly, an idea forming. Maybe our purpose isn't just to create art or observe or even to teach. Maybe it's to give people permission. Permission to be authentic, to be seen, to see others. Permission, Sophie repeated. I like that. That's what you gave me. Permission to be myself. They stood together, two observers, watching the freshman hallway with empathy and understanding. And Maya realized that this witnessing, this seeing, this granting of permission, was her art form now. Not just the drawings, but the act of creating space for truth to exist. Seventh period art brought another surprise. Mr. Chen had invited a guest, a representative from the Rhode Island School of Design, who'd apparently seen Maya's viral video and wanted to meet her. Ms. Chen, the woman introduced herself as Diana Reeves, admissions counselor. Your teacher sent me your portfolio preliminary sketches last night. I've been in this job for 15 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen work this sophisticated from a high school student. Maya didn't know what to say. She'd sent nothing. This must have been Ms. Caldwell and Mr. Chen working behind the scenes, advocating for her, pushing her toward opportunities she was too scared to pursue herself. We'd like to offer you a place in our summer intensive program, Diana continued. Full scholarship, room and board included. You'd spend 6 weeks with professional artists, developing your skills, exploring different media, and most importantly, learning to see your work as valuable, as worthy of serious attention. Maya started, then stopped. A month ago, she would have said no immediately. Would have found a dozen reasons why she couldn't, shouldn't, wasn't good enough. But now, after everything that had happened, after learning that her way of seeing mattered, that her truth-telling had value, she found herself saying something different. I'd like that very much, she said. Thank you. Diana smiled. We'll send the formal acceptance letter and program details next week. But Maya, I want you to understand something. You're not just talented. You're important. The way you see the world, the way you capture humanity, we need more of that. The world needs more people who observe with empathy, who document with love, who see beauty in ordinary moments. After Diana left, Mr. Chen pulled Maya aside. You deserve this, he said firmly. I know you struggle with believing that, but you deserve every opportunity, every recognition, every chance to develop your gift. Don't let fear or humility or false modesty stop you from becoming everything you could be. That evening's after-school session in the art room was crowded. Word had spread, and now there were nearly 30 students working on various projects, self-portraits, observational sketches, photographs, poems, songs. The art room had transformed into a buzzing hive of creativity and truth-telling. Maya moved between students, offering guidance, encouragement, gentle corrections. She was teaching, really teaching, and discovering that she was good at it. Not because she had all the answers, but because she knew how to see what each student needed, how to help them access their own truth. Brandon had progressed beyond drawing his hands. He was now attempting a portrait of his father, not the successful businessman everyone saw, but the tired, uncertain man Brandon sometimes glimpsed late at night when his father thought no one was watching. Tyler had filled pages of his notebook with observations, prose poems about the small moments that revealed character, the way his football coach's hands shook before big games, the way his little sister hummed when she was nervous, the way his mother's voice changed when she talked to her own mother on the phone. Sarah had discovered she loved painting abstract emotions, not realistic portraits, but color and shape and texture that somehow captured the essence of feelings better than any realistic representation could. And Sophie was developing her own style, sketching the spaces between people, the gaps at lunch tables, the distance in hallways, the physical manifestations of social isolation and connection. You've created something magical here, a voice said from the doorway. Maya turned to find Ms. Caldwell standing there, taking in the scene, 30 students, working in concentrated silence, creating truth. I didn't create it, Maya said. I just gave them permission. No, Miss Caldwell corrected gently. You gave them more than permission. You gave them an example. You showed them that authenticity is possible, that truth-telling is powerful, that seeing and being seen is worth the risk. That's not just permission. That's transformation. The following Tuesday brought the day of the Regional Art Education Conference. Maya stood in the bathroom mirror at home, trying to calm her nerves. She was supposed to present in 3 hours, supposed to stand in front of a room full of professional educators and explain her techniques, her philosophy, her way of seeing the world. Her mother appeared in the doorway. You look beautiful, Jennifer said. And terrified. Both are appropriate. I don't know if I can do this, Maya admitted. Speaking in front of my classmates is one thing. But these are teachers, professionals, people who've studied art and education for years. What do I have to offer them? Jennifer sat on the edge of the bathtub, considered her daughter thoughtfully. You have truth, she said finally. You have a genuine gift for seeing people, for honoring them with your observation. That's not something you learn in school. That's something you're born with, something you develop through practice and empathy and courage. And those teachers? They've probably forgotten what it feels like to see that way. You're going to remind them. The drive to the conference center was quiet. But in the back seat, packed carefully in portfolios and folders, was the work. Maya's drawings, yes, but also pieces from Brandon, Tyler, Sarah, Emma, David, Sophie, and a dozen others. A complete documentation of their transformation from performers to truth-tellers. Miss Caldwell and Mr. Chen met them in the parking lot, along with the 10 students who'd been selected to participate in the presentation. They looked nervous but excited, dressed more formally than usual, carrying their art like precious cargo. Remember, Miss Caldwell said as they walked toward the conference center, you're not asking for approval. You're sharing something valuable. They should feel honored that you're willing to show them your work, your process, your truth. The presentation room was smaller than Maya had imagined, maybe 50 chairs arranged theater style, with a projector screen at the front and a table for displaying physical artwork. Teachers were already filing in, settling into seats, chatting with colleagues. They looked friendly, interested, human. Not the intimidating professionals Maya had built up in her mind. Diana Reeves from RISD was there, sitting in the front row, smiling encouragingly. Principal Morrison had come too, along with several other administrators from their district. And in the back row, Maya was surprised and touched to see her mother, who'd taken time off work to be there. Good afternoon, Miss Caldwell began, taking the podium. Thank you all for coming to this session on observational art and authentic connection. I'm Patricia Caldwell, and I teach English at Lincoln High School. But today, I'm not the teacher. Today, I'm simply here to introduce you to someone who's taught me more about seeing truth in the past week than I've learned in 40 years of education. She gestured to Maya. Maya Chen is a 17-year-old junior at Lincoln High. Until last week, she was essentially invisible, a quiet student who sat in the corner of the cafeteria, drawing her classmates without their knowledge or permission. But what they didn't know, what none of us knew, was that she wasn't just drawing. She was seeing. Really seeing. Seeing past the performances and personas and protective walls we all build. Seeing the truth of who we are when we forget to pretend. Miss Caldwell stepped aside, and Maya approached the podium on shaking legs. She looked out at 50 faces, all turned toward her, waiting. A month ago, this would have been impossible. A week ago, even. But now, after everything that had happened, after learning that her voice mattered, Maya found she had something to say. I'm going to tell you a story, she began, her voice quiet but steady. About 3 boys who mocked a quiet girl in the cafeteria. About a moment that changed everything. But mostly, I'm going to show you what I see. She nodded to Tyler, who started the slideshow. The first image was one of Maya's early drawings, technically proficient but emotionally flat, capturing what people looked like but not who they were. This is where I started, Maya said. Observation without understanding. Documentation without empathy. I could draw what I saw, but I wasn't really seeing yet. The next slide showed a progression of drawings, each one revealing more depth, more emotion, more truth. This is where I learned that art isn't about technical perfection. It's about honest perception. It's about seeing people in their unguarded moments and honoring what you find there. Slide after slide showed Maya's development as an artist. But more than that, they showed her development as a human being. Her growing capacity for empathy, her deepening understanding of the human experience, her expanding ability to see beauty in struggle and truth in imperfection. Then the slideshow shifted. Now the images were the before and after, Brandon's carefully constructed persona versus his genuine self-portrait, Sarah's Instagram perfect life versus her honest painting of heartbreak, David's image of strength versus his photograph of exhaustion. Last week, Maya continued, 3 boys grabbed my sketchbook and mocked my art in front of 300 students. They called me creepy, weird, a stalker. They asked what was wrong with me, why I was always alone, why I never talked to anyone. She could see teachers shifting in their seats, uncomfortable, recognizing the scenario, probably remembering similar moments in their own schools. And I could have stayed silent. I could have taken my sketchbook back and returned to my corner, to my invisibility. But instead, I did something I'd never done before. I spoke. I told them what I saw when I drew them. Not their performances, but their truth. Their fear, their uncertainty, their desperate need to be seen for who they really were instead of who they were pretending to be. The slideshow now showed photos from the aftermath, the crowded corner table, the after-school art sessions, students working intensely on their own observational pieces. What happened next surprised everyone, including me. Instead of more mockery, I got a standing ovation. Instead of isolation, I got connection. Instead of invisibility, I got community. Because it turns out, everyone is desperate to be seen. Everyone is tired of performing. Everyone wants permission to be authentic. Maya stepped away from the podium and gestured to her students, who stood and came to the front of the room. These are the 3 boys who mocked me, she said, indicating Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus. And these are some of the students who've been invisible, who've been watching from the corners, who've been waiting for permission to be real. Brandon stepped forward, visibly nervous. I'm Brandon Whitmore, he said. A week ago, I was cruel to Maya because I was scared. Scared that if people saw the real me, the uncertain, lost, imperfect me, they'd realize I wasn't worth their attention. Maya showed me that the real me was exactly what was worth seeing. One by one, the students shared their stories. Tyler talked about learning to stop looking away from uncomfortable truths. Sarah described discovering that vulnerability was strength. Emma discussed the liberation of stepping out from someone else's shadow. David spoke about having his invisible sacrifices honored. Sophie shared what it meant to a freshman to have seniors validate her way of moving through the world. And then they unveiled the art. Pieces that showed their transformation, their truth, their authentic selves. The room fell silent as teachers moved forward to examine the work, not with critical eyes, but with wonder. A teacher raised her hand. How do you teach this? How do you help students develop this capacity for authentic observation? Maya considered the question. You don't teach observation, she said finally. You teach permission. You create space where students feel safe being honest, seeing honestly, sharing honestly. The observation comes naturally once the fear is removed. Another teacher asked, but how do you remove the fear? High school is built on fear, fear of judgment, fear of exclusion, fear of being different. You remove it by being honest yourself, Maya answered. By admitting you're scared too. By showing your own authentic self, your own struggles, your own imperfections. By making vulnerability normal instead of shameful. The questions continued, and Maya answered them as best she could, sometimes deferring to her students, sometimes admitting she didn't have all the answers. But what became clear was that she didn't need all the answers. She just needed to keep asking the right questions, keep creating space for truth, keep granting permission for authenticity. After the formal presentation ended, teachers crowded around the displayed artwork, asking questions, taking photos, requesting permission to share the techniques with their own students. Diana from RISD pulled Maya aside. "This isn't just art," she said. "This is philosophy, psychology, sociology, activism. You're not just an artist, Maya. You're a thought leader. And I think you need to understand the scope of what you've started." "I just wanted my sketchbook back," Maya said, and Diana laughed. "The best revolutions start with personal boundaries," she said. Someone says no more, and suddenly everyone else realizes they can say it too. As they packed up to leave, Principal Morrison approached Maya's mother. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "I want you to know that we're creating a permanent program at Lincoln High based on Maya's work. An elective course on observational art and authentic connection. We'd like Maya to help design the curriculum, maybe even co-teach when she's ready." Jennifer looked at her daughter, pride shining in her eyes. "That's up to Maya," she said. And Maya, surrounded by her community of truth-tellers, surrounded by evidence that her way of seeing mattered, that her gift had value, that her truth could transform others, found herself saying yes. The ride home was celebratory. The students were buzzing with excitement, replaying the presentation, marveling at how well it had gone, making plans for how to expand their work. But Maya was quiet, processing, integrating, understanding. Her mother noticed, of course. "What are you thinking about?" she asked during a rare moment of quiet. "I'm thinking about how strange it is," Maya said slowly, "that the worst moment of my life, being humiliated in front of everyone, having my privacy violated, being called creepy and weird, turned into the best moment. Into transformation, community, purpose. That's often how it works," Jennifer said. "The breaking points become breaking through points. The moments that could destroy us instead remake us, if we're brave enough to use them that way." "I was never trying to be brave," Maya admitted. "I was just trying to defend myself, to protect my art, to explain why I do what I do." "That's what bravery is," Jennifer said. "Standing up for what matters to you, even when you're terrified. Especially when you're terrified." That night, alone in her room, Maya opened her sketchbook to a fresh page. And instead of drawing someone else, instead of documenting the world around her, she drew the cafeteria confrontation. Not from her perspective, but from above, a bird's-eye view showing the 3 boys at her table, the 300 students watching, and herself, small but standing, defending her truth. In the drawing, she captured something she hadn't seen in the moment. She captured the watching students not as a hostile audience, but as witnesses to possibility. She captured Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus not as villains, but as scared kids whose cruelty was a mask for their own pain. And she captured herself not as a victim, but as someone choosing courage, choosing voice, choosing to be seen. She titled it "The Moment Everything Changed" and added it to her portfolio. The next day at school, Maya's corner table was more crowded than ever. They had to push together 3 tables now, and students were still standing nearby, hoping for space. The community had grown beyond what Maya could have imagined, not just students seeking authenticity, but students who wanted to help others find it too. "We need to formalize this," Emma said. "Not in a way that kills the spontaneity, but in a way that makes it sustainable. What happens when Maya graduates? What happens to the freshmen who need this next year?" They spent lunch period discussing structure, how to create leadership that wasn't hierarchical, how to maintain authenticity while growing, how to preserve the magic while making it accessible. "What if we train observers?" Sophie suggested. "Each of us commits to helping one person learn to see the way Maya taught us to see. And then they help someone else. It spreads, but it stays personal, intimate, real. Like a family tree of seeing," David said. "Each person connected to the person who taught them, but all of us connected to each other through the practice of authentic observation." Plans began to form. They would formalize the after-school sessions, create a rotating leadership structure, document their techniques not as rigid rules but as flexible frameworks. They would preserve Maya's original intention, to see people, to honor truth, to grant permission for authenticity, while allowing it to evolve, to grow, to adapt. Brandon had been quiet through the planning, and finally he spoke up. I want to apologize to the whole school, he said. Formally. I want to stand up in an assembly or make a video or something and acknowledge what I did, why I did it, and how wrong it was. Because there are probably other Brandons out there, other kids who are cruel because they're scared. And they need to know that there's another way. That's brave, Tyler said quietly. No, Brandon corrected, glancing at Maya. That's honest. And I'm learning that honesty is harder than bravery, but also more important. The week continued in this vein, plans being made, community being built, truth being honored. Maya found herself at the center of it all, not because she sought leadership, but because people kept turning to her for guidance, for permission, for assurance that their way of seeing was valid. On Friday, Ms. Caldwell asked Maya to stay after English class. I have something for you, she said, pulling out a letter. This arrived yesterday. It's from a publisher. They want you to compile your drawings into a book. A coffee table art book featuring your observational work, along with essays from you and your students about the philosophy behind it. Maya took the letter with trembling hands. A book. Her art, bound and published, shared with people beyond her school, beyond her town. It was overwhelming and terrifying and thrilling all at once. You don't have to decide now, Ms. Caldwell said. But Maya, this is your work being recognized not just as high school art, but as real art. Important art. Art that matters. That evening, Maya's after-school session was interrupted by an unexpected visitor. A local journalist, not the one Principal Morrison had turned away, but a different one, from a small community newspaper, had shown up, wanting to do a story about the transformation happening at Lincoln High. I'm not interested in sensationalizing, the journalist, a woman named Rita Garcia, explained. I don't want to write about bullying or viral videos or teen drama. I want to write about community, about what happens when young people are given permission to be authentic. That's the real story here. Maya looked around the art room at her students, 30 young people, working intensely on various projects, supporting each other, offering honest feedback, creating truth. She thought about her mother's words, that visibility came with choices about how to use it. Okay, Maya said. But you have to talk to all of them, not just me. This isn't my story anymore. It's our story. Rita spent the next 2 hours moving between students, listening to their stories, photographing their work. She talked to Brandon about transformation from cruelty to authenticity. She interviewed Sophie about finding her voice as a freshman. She spoke with David about having his invisible sacrifices honored. Each story was different, but they all shared a common thread, the liberation of being seen for who they truly were. What you've created here, Rita said to Maya at the end, is countercultural. In a world that rewards performance and curates identity, you're teaching radical authenticity. That's revolutionary. I just teach people to draw what they see, Maya protested. No, Rita corrected gently. You teach people that what they see matters. That their perspective has value. That truth-telling is an act of courage. That's so much more than drawing. The article came out the following week, and it was beautiful, not sensational, not exploitative, but genuinely honoring the work they were doing. Rita had captured the essence of their community, the philosophy behind their practice, the transformation that happened when people were given permission to be real. The article spread further than they'd anticipated. Other schools reached out, wanting to know how to start similar programs. Teachers from across the state contacted Ms. Caldwell and Mr. Chen, asking for guidance. Parents wrote letters thanking them for creating a space where their children could be authentic. And through it all, Maya kept drawing. She drew the evolution of Brandon from performative confidence to genuine humility. She drew Tyler's journey from complicit bystander to active truth seeker. She drew Marcus learning to be sad instead of funny, to feel instead of deflect. She drew Emma stepping out from her namesake's shadow and into her own light. She drew Sarah painting through her heartbreak and finding beauty in pain. She drew David's exhaustion transforming into pride as his sacrifices were honored. She drew Sophie finding her voice, her vision, her place. But more than that, she drew the spaces between them, the connections forming, the community building, the truth emerging. She documented not just individuals, but the collective transformation of a group of performers learning to be authentic. 1 month after the cafeteria confrontation, Principal Morrison called another meeting. This time, it was in the auditorium, and he'd invited the entire school. Maya sat in the front row with her corner table community, nervous about what was coming. Principal Morrison had been mysterious about his intentions, saying only that he had an announcement that involved her. "Good afternoon," Principal Morrison began, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "I've called this assembly because something extraordinary has happened at Lincoln High. Something that started in our cafeteria 4 weeks ago and has grown into a movement that's capturing attention far beyond our walls." He gestured to the large screen behind him, which lit up with images from Maya's sketchbooks, her observations, her truths, her art. One of our students, Maya Chen, spent 3 years quietly documenting our school. She saw us, really saw us, in ways we didn't see ourselves. And when she was confronted, when she was mocked for her art, she did something remarkable. She didn't retreat into silence. She spoke her truth. More images appeared, photos from the after-school sessions, portraits created by students learning to observe authentically, the crowded corner tables at lunch. What Maya started has transformed our school culture. Students are learning to see each other not as stereotypes or social categories, but as complex human beings worthy of attention and honor. They're learning that authenticity is stronger than performance, that vulnerability is courage, that seeing and being seen is the foundation of real community. Principal Morrison paused, looking directly at Maya. "In recognition of this extraordinary contribution to our school culture, and with the full support of our staff and school board, I'm pleased to announce the creation of the Maya Chen Authentic Arts Fellowship, a program that will provide resources, space, and support for students interested in observational art and authentic connection. Maya has agreed to help design the program and mentor the first cohort of fellows." The auditorium erupted in applause. Students were standing, cheering, and Maya felt tears streaming down her face, not from sadness or fear this time, but from the overwhelming recognition that her gift, her truth, her way of seeing had created something lasting. But Principal Morrison wasn't finished. "More than that, we're implementing policy changes to better support all our students. We're training teachers in authentic observation techniques. We're creating more spaces for students to express themselves without performance pressure. We're fundamentally rethinking how we value different types of intelligence, different ways of being in the world." He smiled. "Maya, would you like to say anything?" Maya stood on shaking legs and approached the podium. She looked out at the assembled students, 300 faces, no longer anonymous, no longer just subjects for her art. They were community. They were witnesses. They were co-creators of the transformation happening here. "A month ago," Maya began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, drawing all of you without you knowing. I thought I was documenting your lives. But I've learned something important since then. I wasn't just documenting. I was connecting. Every drawing was an act of love, an attempt to say, I see you, you matter, your truth is worth preserving." She paused, gathering her thoughts. 3 boys grabbed my sketchbook and mocked my art. They asked what was wrong with me, why I was always alone, why I couldn't be normal. And for years, I'd asked myself the same questions. But standing here now, I realized there was never anything wrong with me. I was just seeing the world differently, moving through it differently, connecting with it differently. And the beautiful thing, Maya continued, is that we all see differently. We all have our own way of observing, understanding, expressing truth. Brandon sees through the lens of transformation. Tyler through the lens of moral courage. Sarah through color and emotion. David through photography and documentation of sacrifice. Emma through sculpture and the physical manifestation of identity. Sophie through the spaces between people. She gestured to her community. None of these ways of seeing is better than the others. They're just different. And when we bring them all together, when we honor each person's unique perspective, we create something richer, truer, more complete than any single vision could be. So that's why I hope this fellowship, this program, this movement becomes, not a replication of my way of seeing, but a celebration of seeing itself. A community where every perspective is valued, where every truth matters, where everyone has permission to observe the world in their own way and share what they find. Maya felt her voice growing stronger, powered by conviction. To the quiet kids sitting in corners, documenting the world around them, you're not weird. You're observers, and the world needs observers. To the performers who are exhausted from maintaining their masks, you can take them off. We'll still see you. We'll see you better. To the ones who feel invisible, you're not. Someone sees you. Someone honors you. Someone is drawing you right now, trying to capture the truth of who you are. She looked directly at Brandon, Tyler, and Marcus. And to the ones who've been cruel, who've lashed out from their own fear and pain, you can change. Transformation is always possible. Authenticity is always available. You just have to be brave enough to stop performing and start being. The applause when she finished was deafening, but Maya barely heard it. She was looking at the faces in the auditorium, some crying, some smiling, some thoughtful, all of them engaged. All of them seeing and being seen. After the assembly, Maya was surrounded by students wanting to thank her, to share their own stories, to ask about the fellowship. But through the crowd, she saw someone approaching who made her heart skip, a quiet girl, probably a sophomore, clutching a sketchbook to her chest. "Excuse me," the girl said when she finally reached Maya. "I'm like you. I sit alone and I draw people and I've always thought there was something wrong with me. But watching you, hearing you, I realized maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I'm just seeing differently." Maya took the girl's hands in hers. "What's your name?" "Iris," the girl said quietly. "Iris," Maya repeated. "That's beautiful. Do you know what an iris is?" It's the part of the eye that controls how much light comes in. It's literally the part of us that determines how we see. Your name is perfect for someone who sees the world in her own way. Iris started crying. "No one's ever said my name was perfect before." "Well, it is," Maya said firmly. "And your way of seeing is perfect too. Different doesn't mean wrong. It just means unique. And unique is exactly what the world needs." She pulled out her phone. "Give me your number. You're coming to our next after-school session. I want to see your work, and I want you to meet others who see like we do. You're not alone anymore, Iris. None of us are." As the crowd dispersed and students headed to their next classes, Maya found herself alone in the auditorium with her mother, who'd taken another half-day off work to attend the assembly. "I'm so proud of you," Jennifer said, pulling Maya into a tight embrace. "Not because you're famous or starting programs or changing school policy. I'm proud because you stayed true to yourself. Because when the world tried to make you feel wrong for being who you are, you refused to believe it. You stood up and said, 'No, this is me, and I'm valuable exactly as I am.' I learned that from you," Maya said. "You gave up your art, but you never gave up your truth. You never pretended to be someone you weren't. You showed me that authenticity was possible, even when it's hard." They stood together in the empty auditorium, and Maya thought about how much had changed in 4 weeks. From invisible to visible. From silent to speaking. From isolated to connected. From documenting others to being documented herself. But the most important change was internal. She no longer questioned whether her way of moving through the world was valid. She no longer apologized for seeing truth when others were content with performance. She no longer hid her gift or diminished her perspective or made herself small to make others comfortable. She was Maya Chen. Observer. Artist. Truth-teller. Leader. And she was exactly who she was supposed to be. That evening, in her bedroom surrounded by sketchbooks documenting 3 years of Lincoln High, Maya opened a fresh notebook. This one wouldn't be for documenting others. This one would be for documenting the movement itself, the transformation of a school culture, the creation of a community, the revolution of authenticity in a world of performance. On the first page, she drew the cafeteria scene one more time. but this version was different from all the others. This version showed not just the confrontation, but everything that came after: the expanding corner tables, the crowded art room, the assembly, the connections forming. She drew it as a tree, with that moment of standing up to Brandon as the roots, and everything that followed as branches spreading outward, reaching toward light. She titled it "How One Truth Created a Forest of Seeing." And then she turned to a blank page and began to draw the future, not as prediction, but as possibility. She drew Iris finding her community. She drew the fellowship program flourishing. She drew other schools starting their own observational art movements. She drew a world where seeing and being seen was normal, where authenticity was celebrated, where different ways of moving through the world were honored rather than questioned. It was ambitious. Maybe impossible. But Maya had learned something important over the past month: the impossible becomes possible when someone is brave enough to start, to speak, to stand up and say, "This matters. I matter. We all matter." Her phone buzzed with a text from the corner table group chat. They'd created one to stay connected beyond school hours. "Brandon, same table tomorrow?" "Emma, always. That's our spot now." "Sarah, bringing my paints. Feeling inspired." "David, got some new photos to share." "Sophie, can Iris come?" Maya invited her. "Tyler, the more truth seekers, the better." "Marcus, I wrote a song. Fair warning, it might make you cry." Maya smiled and added her own message: "See you all tomorrow. And bring your authentic selves, they're the only selves allowed at our table." She set down her phone and returned to her drawing, adding details, capturing the possibilities she could see emerging from what they'd started. Outside her window, the autumn evening was turning to dusk, golden light fading to purple shadows. But in her room, surrounded by evidence of her gift, her truth, her transformation, Maya felt nothing but light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.